Namaskar. Welcome to Daily Global Insights with Sree and Sree, episode 212. Today is July 27th, Tuesday, and here are the global news items. Taiwan temptation keeps US guessing about Xi's true intention. Pentagon must pick up pace to counter China, top US general warns. Japan fumes as Russian Prime Minister talks of free trade zones on Kuril Islands. Sridharji, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Namaskar. Good morning to everybody on this bright Tuesday morning, and we're looking forward to another exciting 20 to 30 minutes to discuss, various topics on Daily Global Insights. So obviously, Taiwan features right on top of the agenda. The temptation of Taiwan seems to be overbearing for China. What exactly is the move that China is going to make? Keeps the U.S. Armed forces and the U.S. Think tank guessing as to what would be the move. This is just the discussions that happened between Wendy Sherman and the deputy Chinese foreign minister. And there's a warning signal coming from the vice chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, John Hyten. John Hyten is the vice chairman and the Joint Chief of Staff, and he is saying that the Pentagon or the U.S. Armed Forces has spent a lot of time, combating for the past 20 years, dealing with, terrorists and unknown enemies in the desert of Afghanistan and Iraq, fighting a known enemy, a country, and, which has got a defined mission with far more combative capabilities like China requires war preparedness, and U.S. Pentagon needs to really rev up its efforts to be ready to take on any looming battle that is likely to come. Now, with regard to Russia, Russia on the northern tip of Japan is trying to establish, we covered this already in the Kuril Islands, the three islands, which make up, they redrew the border in 1945 and staked claim for those three islands, which is right on the tip of the Hokkaido Peninsula. So the story is now the Prime Minister having visited, has made a statement that he wants to convert this into a free trade zone, which sends shivers through the spine of the Japanese. Japan has been contesting that this has to go back to the old boundary. And when you actually look at it, it does make a lot of common sense in terms of why it belongs to Japan rather than the Russian point.
And CIA chief warns that Taliban is in the strongest military position in decades. US wants Federal Aviation Administration travel warning over the Afghan region. Now, how many corridors are open between US and other countries now, sir? Do you have any idea?
No, I think that the U.S., this is very specifically, they have to fly, especially to go to the West Asia as well as to the South Asia continent, the South Asian region. Necessarily, they have to fly over the Afghan region. The point, the warning that is coming through is, one of the questions that we had raised yesterday was, where did the airstrikes of the U.S. come from? Especially if they have no troops on ground and no planes on ground in Afghanistan. So military aircraft is probably flying. So which is the reason why they have cut off the perimeter, which is to say that this is a no-fly zone for commercial airlines. So therefore, that is what the Federal Aviation Authority has warned, that no flights over the Afghan region, and it is preserved for the military purpose. Now, the other more striking point here is if CIA is warning based on all the intelligence from Mr. William Burns. Recall that Sree Ji had talked about his quite quick visit to Pakistan for 2 days. We don't know the outcome, but of those discussions and his visit. But the fact is that he's making a statement yesterday that is to say that the Taliban is far more compact and battle ready, fully equipped to deal with issues on ground. It just also begs the question: 20 years United States has been on ground, so which means what has happened? They allowed Taliban to build up, selling via the narcotics trade, build up a huge set of capabilities, without diminishing those while on ground. It begs the question.
Iran is taking advantage of the lull in nuclear talks with the US to get dangerously close to a nuclear weapon, and there must be a deadline to return to negotiations. Israeli officials have warned their American counterparts. Where is Naftali? He has been quiet for a while. Jordan has been hit by Iranian drones, claims King Abdullah of Jordan. Jordan cannot be Palestinian homeland in a two-state solution. So your thoughts on where in the world Naftali Bennett might be?
Naftali Bennett is very much enjoying his stint as the Prime Minister of Israel. He has blamed his predecessor and his mentor, Benjamin Netanyahu, for Iran's development of nuclear capabilities. If you recall that, we have been covering in DWI or DGI that there has been progressive diminishing of the capabilities and the delay of the centrifugal capabilities for it to build a nuclear weapon. But it looks like Iran is almost imminent, which is the reason why they're refusing to discuss with France, or France has also raised the issue that they're not coming to the negotiating table. So where's Naftali Bennett? Naftali Bennett has now not only blamed Benjamin Netanyahu, but he summoned his defense minister as well as his foreign minister. So they're trying to tell United States, look, you got to do something about this. Now, this is the same Naftali Bennett who said he would not see a nuclear-armed Iran, and Israel reserves the right to take the appropriate action. So it is very, sobering thought to assume that he's now saying, "Oh, United States, come and help us," or "the world, come and help us," while Iran is saying, flexing its muscles and basically saying, "I'm ready. I couldn't be bothered as to be negotiating with you."
After dismissing the prime minister, Tunisia president sacked the defense minister as the nation plunges into chaos. Nigeria, Tanzania, and Niger region continue to fight the terrorist groups amid daily streaks of incidents. Sir, this is something that you have warned of a few weeks ago.
Well, I think that, sorry, sir, before I want to touch on Jordan and then we get into this. Jordan,
Yeah.
I forgot to so Jordan suddenly has become part of this. You remember the triple I,
Yes.
the fulcrum point.
Yes.
Now you can see that, Iran, Iraq, where leads into Jordan, and Jordan has received drone attacks. But suddenly, lo and behold, apparently, the King Abdullah, a Jordanian king, has raised the issue. Hey, Jordan is not the resolution model for the two-state solution for the Palestinians. We're not going to carve out the Jordan. There's a significant amount of Palestinian people in Jordan who are employed within Jordan, but that's not the substitute. So there is another lurking issue that is brewing there. From where this is coming, we don't know, but certainly he has raised the issue. As far as coming back to the Sahel region, we can begin to see that there is every day there are incidents. Now Niger, here's the Burkina Faso region, and then you have Nigeria, where you have had the Boko Haram incidents in terms of people being abducted from schools, girls being abducted and then released, etc. So you have, and then Tanzania, where you have the Islamist forces fighting the government. So you have in continuous stream of incidents almost every day reported. We're just alerting that there are activities taking place here, and is this another kind of the fulcrum point for something to break out? Remains to be seen. As United States makes withdrawal from Iraq, there's almost absent in Syria, and they make withdrawal in Afghanistan. What's going to happen to all these regions? If you go back in time, these were the regions where whatever the different names of ISIS, Al Qaeda were active once upon a time.
Europe looking at travel restrictions as Delta variant cases rise. US is looking at opening travel to UK visitors. US maintains restrictions on European travel amid virus surge. Singapore is set to allow quarantine-free travel from September, with the country set to fully vaccinate 80% of its population over the next 2 months. So some countries are well on their way to vaccinating their entire population. And I think that is the landmark that everyone should look to achieve, isn't it, sir?
Absolutely. If you recall, EU was contemplating opening up the air corridors for European, especially the US visitors to travel and come by, and the economy to open up. But it looks like EU is, with Delta variant rising in many places, they're trying to shut down. Just for people, for the record, United Kingdom today has number 2 active cases in the world. Number 1 is United States at 5 million plus, and United Kingdom is somewhere close to 1 million active cases today as we speak. So just to give you a number, India is just less than 400,000 active cases, to put things in perspective, right? Now then you compare the populations, okay, United Kingdom compared to United States or India. So it just gives you a context. The Delta variant is very profuse and embedded within many facets of the population. So which is where the worry is coming from. Now, Singapore has done the right thing, which says that from September, they will now allow quarantine-free travel, by which time they would have 80% of the people to have been vaccinated, because they have also seen rise in the Delta variant cases. If you're fully vaccinated, 80% of the population is vaccinated, the possibility of contraction and the epidemic spreading is very small. So I think, as you rightly said, that's the right benchmark that the world has to follow.
And let's take a look at India news now. The situation remains precarious in Afghanistan, with the Taliban making territorial gains, and India has backed constitutional continuity in Kabul in case of any power sharing pact. Afghan government informs India that Lashkar-e-Taiba is shifting base to Afghanistan. Afghan army chief postpones his visit to India as the Taliban war intensifies. There seems to be a intensification of the Afghan Taliban attacks at the Afghan forces. Now, people have been accusing the neighbor of abetting this, and the United States also is striking back with drones. Where do you see this thing headed, sir? I thought that there was some sort of a control that was established. The line was established, but looks like again it's opening up.
So where do I see this heading? I think there will be some chaos before there's a storm before the lull, or in this instance there's no lull before the storm. The lull has passed. There has been a storm, and I think it's going to blow over. Now everybody is backing a constitutional mechanism. Taliban himself, we have reported again in DGI, Taliban himself has supported power sharing, except they have put a condition, which is namely to say they do not want to have the present president Ashraf Ghani to be part of that administration. They put that condition. So we will see some form of constitutionally backed. Taliban also wants to have be in power and administering. So there may be a constitutional amended administration. What that would look like and how long would that last is a big question. But Taliban is not used to sharing power. It believes in control. It believes in unilateral imposition of rules as it sees it. And clearly there's trouble brewing in Afghanistan. There may be some temporary impasse, but then eventually I think we are going back to see the issues. Now, as far as these neighbors of Afghanistan are concerned, whether they would have any hold and any sway, the chances of what happened pre 9/11 versus today, post 2021, or 2021 could be different, where Taliban may say, I can take care of myself, I don't need anybody's help.
Rajnath Singh to visit Tajikistan for the SCO, Shanghai Cooperation, I think. National Security Advisor and Foreign Ministers meet where the other two meetings held. Indian Army pays tribute to Kargil soldiers at the Dras War Memorial. So let's get back to SCO. Why is it taking place in Kazakhstan this time?
Tajikistan is holding the chairmanship for a period of 2 years. So most of the meetings are being held in Tajikistan. So we had the foreign ministers meet. There was also the other initiatives. So now they are reassembling for the defense ministers meet. India continues to engage and participate. Remember, SCO has Russia, has China, has also Pakistan, but it holds its position very firm in terms of its fundamental principles. You saw that Dr. Jaishankar make the point, especially on the terror issues as it relates to Pakistan, as well as the unilateral status quo change as far as the border issues is concerned. India has not, let its flag down, and it has been very firm. But it's allowed it to discuss and dialogue and be part of the setup. India enjoys a very good relationship with Tajikistan and Uzbekistan and so on and so forth. The foreign ministers have repeatedly visited those countries.
Anthony Blinken's India visit, wide-ranging issues, continued Pakistan support to terror groups, regional security situation stemming from the Afghan pullback, assessment of Indo-Pacific security, Quad in-person meeting in the United States later this year, Quad vaccine initiative and Quad foreign ministers meet, and more other areas of cooperation. That's quite a bit of items that Blinken would like to go over India. I'm glad to see that at least the human rights thing appears to be off the table. There never was an issue. This is a hyperbole created by a vested few.
Well, I think that there are two things. One is, has people, I mean, even Indian, by and large, the media and the people are very gullible. So has there been a formal press statement issued by Antony Blinken which says he's going to raise the human rights issues, and that is the number one agenda of Mr. Blinken? Has he issued a press release? No, he has not issued a press release. So therefore, this media is engaged in this active engagement of their assertions and their principles and their self-indulging agenda that they want to impose what they think and create this confusion. Whereas the agenda of Mr. Blinken is very clear. I mean, United States has got number of problems. It is leaving Afghanistan. The dialogue that Afghanistan is having is more and more with India. So he needs to get an assessment, how India is to deal with. So that's one of the first items that they're going to talk about. And that's one of the biggest items that, in fact, they're going to talk about. And second, they're going to talk about what's going to happen on the Indo-Pacific side of the ledger. Because right now, India has not featured in any of this, multilateral, bilateral, trilateral discussions that has happened between United States, for example, United States and Japan, United States and Korea, United States and Lloyd Austin is visiting Philippines, Vietnam, and Singapore. What's happening in that? So there has been a separate dialogue that is conducted with India around the Indo-Pacific, which makes one to conclude that they want to deal with this whole China threat in a different manner by revving up the different regions, and probably Indo-Pacific is India's responsibility. But I'm inferring, I'm not kind of saying that is the position of the United States. Then there's a Quad meeting that is taking place later this year at the leaders level. The last meeting was in March, which was purely online. Again, you can see the agenda. The agenda is around the vaccines. It's not about the security, but they want to have that meeting. So there's a preparatory work, and he's got time with the Prime Minister of India as well. And then the broad area of cooperation which India and United States have around from defense to other domains. So nowhere there is this question of human rights being the priority. They got, the world is burning. When the world is burning, the last thing that we want to discuss is an issue that is relegated to probably the 100th item in the back burner. If you ask today in the United States, what's the number one issue? The number one issue is the infrastructure bill. What's the number two issue? More and more surges to happen around the border. Nobody is talking about, yes, Antony Blinken has said that he's going to bring United Nations fellows into discussing the minority issues and the rights of the whether there is a discrimination, etc. But that's probably 15th item on his agenda. So this is basically a revying up irrelevant kind of an agenda. I've even seen Alicia Ayers, who was formerly in the Department of State, writing, "Oh, it is good that if he brings up an integration, all these things." How long these people are going to talk about integration is, this is not an India-US dialogue issue. There are other things to focus on.
China border security. With focus on border connectivity, 73 critical roads are being developed along the Indo-China border on a priority basis by India. India is also developing 33,000 kilometers of natural gas pipeline to create a national gas grid. The unemployment levels rise to 7.14%, and with COVID 2 lasting longer, exports will be the one factor that will be driving India's recovery, say experts. India's tariffs dropped to 15% from 17.6% in a positive development with import substitution. The number is still higher than the 13.5% in 2014. Your thoughts, sir, before we go on to US news? We are running a little bit late, so we need to pick up some speed, sir.
Okay, great. So basically, the conclusion is that India has organized itself fairly well from infrastructure on the border side. The natural gas is something a long cherished move, which is to dispense. So I think they're creating infrastructure around that. The tariffs is basically the PLI program seems to be making its positive impact. So there is no need for tariffs to mitigate any imports and creating an imbalance in the import bill. So India is on the move on that front as well.
And in United States news, the House Select Committee investigating the deadly pro-Trump invasion of the United States Capitol will hold its first hearing Tuesday. 4 cops will testify first. We must remember that Nancy Pelosi chose 2 Republican congressmen who are critical of Trump. So essentially, people are looking at it as if saying that this committee is loaded. Let's see how it plays out. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy is branding the 2 Republicans serving on the Select Committee investigating the Jan 6 riot at the US Capitol as Pelosi Republicans. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are that I think, this is another attempt by Nancy Pelosi to somehow come up with a predetermined conclusion. You predetermine what you want to get out of it and you run the agenda. I think this is going to be another, forecast, which is going to, come to conclusion, and people are going to have a laugh at it rather than focusing on more pressing issues that the nation. You give it to an investigation agency, they will deal with it, and then done. Why should you have a House investigation committee and then run this writ going on for I don't know how many days? But anyway. My conclusion is that Adam Kinzinger, whom we talked about, and Miss Cheney are not the stellar stalwarts of the Republican Party to give. They already have opinions on Trump, so we can see which way this outcome is progressing.
And Nancy Pelosi will go down as the one person who has impeached a US president not once but twice. That could be a very dubious record, but that is done and dusted. Maybe she's looking for a three-peat. Let's wait and see. Trump urges Republicans to reject the infrastructure deal and says don't let the radical left play you for fools. This infrastructure deal is, I think, in my opinion, it's a good thing, sir. I could be wrong. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are that the $579 billion extendable up to flexibility to go up to $1 to $1.2 trillion is a good deal because it itemizes and focuses on specific areas. But the government track record of investing, managing such large pools of capital in United States is very poor. Is very poor to abysmal. So we already have $6.5 trillion in the budget that we have expended, and that needs to be added to the debt. Okay, to lift the debt limit from 22 trillion to 28.5 trillion, adding the 6.5. It remains a question mark. Where is this money gone? Where is this money? So now you're going to add. According to the Republicans, they want to add $2.1 trillion plus a $3.5 trillion deficit budget. I think to me the numbers are mind-boggling, Sriji.
Beijing accuses US of wrongdoing at the meeting in China and hands over lists. China also presses US to drop sanctions. US calls on China to be a responsible power. China will ask even for the moon. President Biden and Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi announced Monday an agreement to reduce the number of US combat troops in Iraq by the end of the year from combat, it will go down to advisory. This is in Iraq. US and 20 nations urge Cuban government to treat Cuban protesters per the legal rights of the land. So looking at what is happening in Iraq, so US is going to withdraw from Iraq. So the III that we've been talking about, the two eyes will get a lot more emboldened, and that can only mean trouble for the other eye.
Exactly, the three eyes are the new pivot in the greater West Asian region. If you very carefully see the West Asian countries which created what you call as the Abrahamic Accord under Trump, they're silent. They are not part of the discussions. They're all focused on the economic development. Whereas these three eyes, always one eye is going to be engaged. The three eyes are going to be the epicenter. Unnecessarily, they have brought Jordan into the ledger with this Palestinian resolution. As you rightly said, it is no holds barred once the US forces leave.
Border Patrol apprehend over 20,000 illegal immigrants in 1 week in the busiest sector. Texas troopers bolstered by out-of-state troopers in the border. This helps at least to contain the inflow in Texas somewhat. Your thoughts on this? Why isn't Kamala Harris, the vice president, coming out and making any statements regarding this?
She doesn't want to have any controversy, any failed actions, being stuck on her, given the present state of Mr. Biden's health. Okay, so therefore, I don't think she has been playing a very cautious role. She has her own aspirations. So you can see her poll numbers have dipped quite dramatically. We'll discuss that another day for want of time. But basically, she has kept aloof. And most of the action has come from Texas and the Texas governor and the Texas attorney general, backed by several Republican states who have supported Texas in mitigating the border issues that is emanating from this surge.
And France warned the United States in 2015 about the Wuhan lab it helped build, former COVID-19 investigator claims. Biden to Virginia or Veterans Administration doctors, vaccine mandate is coming. Americans are mixing and matching the vaccines over Delta variant concerns. So there is still a little bit of uncertainty in the United States over the efficacy of Pfizer and Moderna on the Delta variant, isn't it? Whereas Covaxin appears to be doing quite well.
Covaxin and Covishield both appear to be doing well as far as India is concerned. And same AstraZeneca seems to be, at least in the countries where it has been. Israeli medical group has been, or the Department of Health Sciences in Israel has been consistently stating that the Pfizer-BioNTech, efficacy of the Pfizer-BioNTech is around 55% or less than 60%. So it's obviously that data has not come out in the United States, except what has come out in the United States is that perhaps there is a need for booster as we step out of summer and step into winter. That's one thing. The second is that still only 54% of the population is vaccinated. The target was 70%. So they're saying that they probably need to think about, and then, one more data point which we have said, that there is greater than 60% in some states, greater than 80% in some states, active cases is due to Delta variant. This is an alarming number. We have been saying this for past 2 weeks or 3 weeks, that there's more active cases in the United States. If US doesn't take, then we're going to have another pandemic and shut down. Already, we are going to have a mask mandate, not that anybody listens, but we could soon have other types of mandates coming because the variant is active. Hence the reason for this mixing and matching that is going on, sir.
And let's take a look at markets now. The S&P ekes out another record as investors gear up for tech earnings. Elon Musk's electric vehicle company, Tesla, beat expectations on both the top and bottom lines and passed 1 billion in quarterly net income for the first time, a tenfold increase since last year. Bitcoin tops 40,000 for the first time since June as the cryptocurrency rallies, and housing boom is over as new home rates fall. Sir, with your permission, I will start with the indices numbers. I have the graphic up there. The Dow Jones is up, S&P is up, and so is the Nasdaq.
Well, just to put things in perspective, if you see, we said the futures were down about the yesterday morning when we discussed, and during the course of the day, the Dow dropped about 100 points, and you can see it has made its way back to 82.76, because usually it's like a herd. Once you have one tech company announcing the results, we have the rest of the people generally follow similar trend. The Tesla results was outstanding. Some of the other results that came out were very good. So there's still the positive earning momentum. So the question that was asked is, to summarize in the interest of time, that basically the markets are prepared to let go of inflation, COVID, Delta variants, low, what you call the housing boom being over, but still focused around earnings and willing to reward the companies. That is why you are seeing the markets climb with mindset isolated from these issues. So that's my read on the market indices. With regard to the Bitcoin, that's a data which is basically showing once in a given day, how the variability has been. It went up 30% over the weekend, and from 30,000. It went to about 40,000, and it settled around 38,000 or 39,000 as we speak. So Bitcoin crypto is back, and you will begin to see it continues to chug along as we had predicted, early this year. Okay, so that's the conclusion on the market side.
And with that, we bring today's GGI to a close. We'll be back again tomorrow, bright and early. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.